Well, the reason for the season, the reason we're all here today is to discuss the updated rankings for the 2026 class. And for that, we welcome in Hudson Standish, a part of our scouting team. Cooper Patagna, also, who has been here for the start of the show, is part of that scouting team. And Tom will give us the recruiting stories for each of these guys. But Hudson, before we get rolling, we always like to give viewers kind of a peel behind the curtain, an explainer of what the process is when we inevitably get the lovely feedback we've been getting throughout the day of why is this guy here? Why is this guy here? So explain to us, Hudson, how did we arrive today with this fresh set of rankings?
Emily, I think the first thing that you have to mention is that the headliner for this update is the All-Star Game settings. This was the first ever year that juniors were able to compete in these postseason events like the Navy All-American Bowl, Under Armour All-America Game, and the Polynesian Bowl. Close to 80 prospects we got eyes on from our scouting and recruiting teams as a really invaluable live exposure data point, because not only are you getting the game itself, but you're getting a week of practice to kind of evaluate their work habits, how they stack up against good-on-good competition, including seniors that were, 5 stars littered across the board. I think extensive film review is always going to be the building block for our rankings process, but the All-Star games and the recent Under Armour camps definitely helped us go from 5 initial 5 stars to the 12 that we have today.
Just to follow Hudson, I think to his point, being able to see juniors in this setting helped us a lot. I mean, guys like Keisean Henderson, guys like Bo Bentley, Felix Ojo, you go down the list, a lot of these guys we're going to talk about here in a minute. But that ultimate conviction, Hudson talked about it going from 5 to 12, but I think overall the pool of players in the top 100, we're maybe a little bit further down the line than we have ever been in terms of the confidence level that we have. And I got to give a shout out to our friend Andrew Ivins, who's not here with us today. Typically, he did a really good job along with Eric Richards, the Navy All-American Bowl, making the pivot when they did, kind of following the pathway of what Jim Nagy and the Senior Bowl did, inviting juniors to that game. This is how college football has changed in high school football as well. So seeing these juniors a little bit earlier in a good-on-good setting against seniors has been a really, really big benefit for us in the evaluation process.
Yeah, and you said it, Hudson. We have 12 5 stars revealing today. Of course, we like to get to 32. That comes at a later date. So these are the elite of the elite. Before we get there, though, Tom, I want to get your feedback on the fact that we have 72% of this top 247 currently uncommitted, which means you got a lot of work to do in the rest of our recruiting team to track all of these recruitments. But overall, what are you seeing as far as these recent recruiting trends that are affected by the transfer portal and the ever-changing college football landscape?
What I think is really wild about the whole process at this point is how many guys are committing early and yet taking these unofficial visits and taking these official visits. There's clearly you can't take any visits if you're going to commit. That's out the window, especially with NIL and things of that nature. That is just no longer the case. So these guys are committing early, locking up a spot, which is beneficial to them, but they're going to take their time, take their visits, take their trips. No coach is really going to push look, you can't be committed to us if you're going to be looking around. Now, if it's later in the process, that's one thing. But this is spring. This is going to be the summer. There's so many kids that are locked in that are essentially, this school is my leader, but I'm going to take 5 official visits after that. So really, that's really all they're claiming right now. So a commitment just no longer means that. It's simply, I'm naming this school my leader.
Yeah, so many visits happening right now. More will happen throughout this summer as that 5 limit is no more. So plenty to go on visits across the country. Let's stop talking about it and start showing some of these prospects. Let's start with the number 12, the first 5-star up 12 spots. The number 1 safety, Bralan Womack. He is currently uncommitted.
Fired up to talk about this kid. And when you talk about him, the name that comes up, and I want to be careful with this, but maybe not shy away at the same time, Caleb Downs. And I want to talk about Bralan Womack from the standpoint of the versatility, what this guy does, 3-phase production, return game, offense, defense. Talk about a guy that can play boundary safety as well. And that's a premium value position. We had 2 guys ranked inside the top 100 of the transfer portal ranking. So everybody is looking for these type of Swiss Army knife players that can do a lot of different things, play the deep pass, play in the slot, add value and run support as well. The other thing that I love about him, 8 interceptions, 4 of those went for pick sixes as well, had over 1,000 yards receiving on the offensive side of the football with 13 touchdowns. Every time we've seen this kid, he's been lights out.
He came on our show and talked about his 4 official visits to Ohio State, Texas A&M, Auburn, and Florida. And one thing I can't stop shaking is that early on in his process, he talked about how much he loved the Buckeyes. He talked about Caleb Downs. So I think Ohio State should feel very good about their chances. But Florida has some strong connections there, some strong relationships. Coach Sincere is a guy that Womack has a ton of interest in potentially playing alongside. And then when you're looking at A&M, he clearly is gravitating towards Mike Elko and what they're doing in College Station. There's a lot of schools right now that should feel good about their chances. And then obviously Auburn, with his sister playing softball there for the Tigers, there's a connection there. They were a little late to the process. If you ask me to make a prediction right now, I'm leaning slightly Ohio State over Florida.
All right, coming in at number 11, offensive tackle Immanuel Iheanacho, currently uncommitted.
Iheanacho, verified at 6'6", 350 pounds, going to be the first Division I prospect from Georgetown Prep in nearly 2 decades. He's a power-based tackle that likely could kick inside at the next level, but more than anything, he's just a punisher in the run game. He can climb levels, really attack second-level defenders, and is a natural athlete when it comes to climbing to that second level and really putting his hands on guys. He's got to clean up some of the issues with his game and pass protection if he's going to stick outside, but he has college-ready size and is somebody that programs across the country are all in for.
With Iheanacho, I think you got 4 schools in play. You got Penn State, Georgia, Maryland, and Oregon. I think there was a lot of buzz about Oregon early on. Maryland is the hometown favorite. I would say Maryland is the team to beat right now. I feel confident in saying they're the leader. I give them the edge over the Ducks at this point.
The number 10 player in 2026. He's the number 1 cornerback, jumping 43 spots. Jorden Edmonds. He is currently uncommitted.
Yeah, big riser for us. If you like height, weight, speed, then this is your type of guy. 6'2.5", 175 pounds. What you see on the screen there, but a two-way athlete, has a basketball background, also the genetics. Dad played in the NFL. And this was another guy who showed up at the Navy All-American Bowl as a junior and really excelled in that type of format. You also look at him in Atlanta. We got to see him at the Under Armour Combine, guy that took home Alpha Dog honors as Hudson Standish was there as well. Those guys that have played in San Antonio, Orlando as juniors, they've showed up months later to these combines in Atlanta, down the line for the Under Armour UA Next camps as well. They have been certainly developed, but their confidence is sky high as well. We love Jorden Edmonds, everything from an athletic standpoint, but the player is certainly rounding into form as well.
You got Tennessee, Florida, Oklahoma, all very much in play. He will take trips to all 3 schools, but I really think this is a battle between Alabama and Georgia. It's something we've seen a million times. He was super close to picking the Crimson Tide recently, decided to put the pause button on his process. Georgia doing all they can to keep him home, but I would still give a slight edge to the Crimson Tide.
Up 10 spots to number 9, we have offensive tackle Keenyi Pepe, currently uncommitted.
He's the next one up at IMG Academy, national prospect factory that just churns out high-level offensive linemen. He's a traits-heavy tackle that I think can stick on the left side moving forward to the next level and maybe even beyond. He has plus agility and adequate flexibility to accompany elite frame. And honestly, with Pepe, he had a dominant showing at the Under Armour All-American game. He was an initial eye catcher. And when you're going up against guys like Zion Elee and Elijah Griffin, 2 different body types that pose different problems, but you win your fair share of battles, it shows a lot about how high floor Pepe is and the monster ceiling that he has.
Pepe's intriguing. He's got some important visits on deck. He's going to get to Washington. He's going to get to Georgia, Tennessee, Florida. They're all in play. Even Bill Belichick's trying to get him to UNC. But the 2 that I'm keeping an eye on are on different sides of the coast. You got USC and Miami. I think they're kind of setting the bar. Again, long way to go. He's got a ton of spring visits, a ton of official visits he's going to take. He's taking his time. But again, watching USC and Miami right now.
The number 8 player in the 2026 class, the number 1 linebacker as well, Xavier Griffin. He is committed to USC.
This guy is a freaking animal. There's no other way to say it. I mean, just in terms of the length, the versatility, Andrew Ivins says it all the time, reminds us a lot of Jahad Campbell, a guy that has shot up NFL draft boards here recently with 1 month to go. And you look at Xavier Griffin, his skill set, what he can do. He has on-ball ability in terms of being able to play in a 2 or 3 point stance. You can also drop him as a second-level defender, too. This guy can do a little bit of everything. So if you're USC right now, who's made a habit of going into the Peach State, trying to lure a guy like Elijah Griffin, Isaiah Gibson, or Justice Terry, this might be the guy that might be worth fighting for, especially if you're not going to have a high volume of guys that you're going to recruit in the Southeast. So a long way to go here, but just in terms of what we've seen out of Xavier Griffin, obviously a skill set that is certainly coveted not only on Saturdays but Sundays as well.
You mentioned it. We've seen the Georgia to USC only to decommit pipeline. This one feels different. This kid is from Alabama, so the Crimson Tide are squarely in the mix. He's living in Georgia. The Bulldogs are absolutely in play, but I think this one is different. I think Xavier Griffin's different. USC fans, I feel like you can breathe a little bit comfortably tonight. I feel really good about USC keeping him in the fold, and I wouldn't have said that a couple months ago. I wouldn't have said it the day he committed. I think the Trojans keep him in the class.
Up 22 spots to number 7, offensive tackle Felix Ojo. He is currently uncommitted.
Felix Ojo just got his driver's license a few months ago. This is a 16-year-old that came into the All-American Bowl with a professional mindset and honestly has completely taken the launching point from the All-American Bowl and just run with it. Alpha Dog at the Under Armour Dallas camp, to Cooper's point, just looks like he was playing at a different level than everybody there. He's a lean corner protector that's flexible, agile, aggressive, and is really just starting to scratch the surface of what he could be. With Felix Ojo, I think this is one of the prospects that we've stamped as a 5-star that's going to command one of the highest NIL markets in the future.
If you go on the 247 Sports message boards, you're going to see a lot of buzz about Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, all these Midwest programs that he's going to visit this spring. They are super excited about it. In the end, I don't see any way he leaves the state of Texas. I think Felix Ojo will eventually be a Longhorn. I think Sarkisian gets that one done.
All right, let's take a quick pause and look at players 7 through 12. We have 2 guys who are number 1 at their position, and cornerback Jorden Edmonds, linebacker Xavier Griffin. Also, you're seeing a lot of 247 Sports logos. That means that these guys are uncommitted. Plenty of opportunity to snatch some talent for your 2026 class. Let's keep it rolling with the number 6 player in the group. That is quarterback Ryder Lyons, who is another uncommitted prospect.
Huge fan of this kid, and you look at him, 6'2.5", 215 pounds. He is stout. He carries his frame really, really well. The way he's kind of built kind of reminds me a little bit of Caleb Williams, but the way that he plays the game, there's some similarities there as well. I love just the patience in the eyes, the ability to go through progressions, a very, very mature signal caller, but the playmaking ability too. Once he leaves the pocket, this guy can do a little bit of everything. He is a savvy type of player that could impact a program very, very quickly at the next level. You look also at his resume over the last 2 years, over 1,500 yards rushing as well. So it's not just through the air. This is going to be a guy that I think a lot of RPO schemes, teams are going to be looking at that can help them not only in the passing game, but in the ground game as well.
Man, that video was really good. I'm just saying, whoever shot that. That said, Ryder Lyons, one of my favorite prospects this cycle. Love dealing with him. Great to deal with in the process. But he's got a long way to go still. Early on, he looked like a USC lock. My crystal ball was in. I believe Greg Biggins also tossed one in for the Trojans, but I no longer feel great about that. I think USC is still firmly in the mix. Oregon is battling. I think they have a great shot in the school. And again, Michigan too, they're definitely in it, but the school not being talked enough about is BYU. I think the Cougars have a great shot to get this one done. Now, with Ryder Lyons, he's a 2027. He's going to essentially reclass. He's going to take a Mormon mission and then arrive a year or so later. But again, yes, USC has a shot. Oregon is definitely a player, but do not sleep on BYU.
All right, up 10 spots to the number 5 player in the class, quarterback Keisean Henderson. He is committed to Houston.
The MVP of the All-American Bowl, and somebody who has a real chance to be a program-changing addition for the Houston Cougars. This is a dynamic athlete who is wired like few others are at this stage of the evaluation process. Originally played wide receiver, defensive back on the 7-on-7 circuit, knew that he wanted to stay at quarterback, really has had incredible development just from the personal skill set standpoint, and moves from the number 1 athlete in our rankings to the number 2 QB and number 5 overall player because he has an innate ability to create chunk plays with his arms or his legs on the move.
His growth has been so fun to watch. You watch him in 7-on-7. He's playing safety. He's playing receiver. Now he's a full-time quarterback. It has been so cool to see because he is an incredible talent and an even better kid. Houston's getting an incredible talent here. Houston is getting one of the best players in America and a guy who can do everything. Florida State, Georgia, Alabama, UNC, they're all pushing to flip him. But this kid is all about loyalty and relationships, and I don't see it any way he leaves the Cougars class.
All right. At number 4, the number 1 and only 5-star wide receiver, Tristen Keys, who is currently uncommitted.
My favorite player in the class here, and this is a guy that, can do a lot of different things, but when you turn on the tape, I just love the way that he plays the game. I mean, you're talking about the ability to change speeds, first, second level, the ability to create separation. You see the dynamic pass-catching ability there as well, strong at the catch point. The temperament matches up to what you see on the field and the way this guy plays. So I love him. We got to see him in the Future 50 down there in Bradenton, Florida. You think about the receivers that have come out the last couple of years with Decorian Moore being the number 1 receiver in the country this past year. You go back the year before that, there's names like Jeremiah Smith, there's names like Cam Coleman and Ryan Williams. Out of all those guys in the last 2 years, Khalil Lockett, Jerome Miles, I'd have this guy at number 4. And I think that's saying a lot because all 3 of those other guys are going to be first-round draft picks. I love the way this kid kind of conducts his business. He might not be the height, weight, speed guy that some of those other guys are, but in terms of a football player that can move the needle for his team, I expect a big impact from day one.
Tristen Keys absolutely saw himself committing at this point. He thought he'd be done with the process, but he has been on this rocket ship that we've talked about with a couple of these other guys. But he's going to take 6 officials. You got Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Miami, Texas A&M. He'll probably get to Mississippi State. He'll probably get to Ole Miss. My crystal ball remains in favor of the Volunteers. I do like Tennessee to get this one done. I just heard too much positive buzz. But the time we spoke this offseason after a junior day at Alabama, he took a trip to Tuscaloosa, connected with Keelan Russell, one of our favorites from last cycle. Alabama is absolutely surging in this one, but I still slightly like Tennessee right now.
All right, moving on to the number 3 player in the class. He's the number 1 offensive tackle, friend of the show, Jackson Cantwell, currently uncommitted.
Jackson Cantwell checks every box that you want. He's a mammoth human that likely finds a home as a right tackle, but has a legitimate opportunity to climb the national shot put rankings, pushing 75 feet in the shot put when the record is 81 feet. He had some ups and downs in Orlando at the Under Armour All-American game, but Cooper says this all the time. Offensive tackle is a long burn when it comes to the individual development. And considering he plays his football in small town Missouri, I was actually pretty encouraged with the flashes of brilliance that he had against a pretty stacked defensive line group.
Came on the 247 Sports College Football Show and dropped his top 6 in his official visits. He's going to be at Oregon, Michigan, Georgia, Missouri, Miami, and Ohio State. If I got to pick an upper tier at this point, it's Oregon, Missouri, and probably Georgia. He's been to those schools the most. He's got great relationships across the board. Lanning's a Missouri guy. He loves Kirby Smart. Missouri's doing everything to keep him home. I'm not ready to put in a crystal ball pick at this point. I don't think he would be ready to pick any school at this point. Long way to go, but we'll know by the end of the summer he's getting close.
Also told us he plans on bringing some hats and drama to his official commitment. The number 2 player in the class, he's the number 1 edge, Zion Elee, committed to Maryland.
Tape is better than the athlete, and the athlete is pretty damn good, right? So when you consider that, I mean, a guy is 6'3", quarter, 225 pounds. He ran 4.64, 34.5-inch vertical jump. So you see the explosiveness. The biggest thing with him, he can win and get away at the high school level with first step explosiveness, quickness off the line of scrimmage, and he is an absolute menace in space. His ability to play in space, change direction, he's got all the tools that you want. The biggest thing that kind of stands out when you look at Zion Elee, he's got to fill out that frame, and then he's got to get better just in terms on contact and sealing the edge. He does those things, he'll be fine, but you consider the fact that he's young for his age, guy that's got a ton of room to develop within his frame. Sky's the limit for him being the number 2 player in the country.
Huge pickup for Maryland. You got Auburn, Ohio State. Texas A&M, many others trying to flip him. What stood out to me in New Orleans when we talked to him at the Next One's event put on by Nike was that he said Oregon's out. They're no longer a player. And early on, that was the other school to watch. I know Oregon led at one point, but shout out to Brian Doan. He's been all over this, whether it's NIL, rev sharing, whatever Maryland is doing, they are pushing all the right buttons. He's said publicly he's completely shut down his process, so all these schools are trying, supposedly wasting their time. We'll see what happens, but I do feel like Maryland fans should be comfortable with keeping Zion Elee in the class.
We have no change at the top of 2026. It is still quarterback Faizon Brandon. He is committed to Tennessee.
This is somebody who completed 77% of his passes on 214 attempts, 35 passing touchdowns to only 2 interceptions, watched his quarterfinal, semifinal, and state championship game all against Max Prep's top 100 schools. And he is just an elite game manager. And while that term has normally been used as a little bit of an insult or a dig, it's just Faizon Brandon knows what he's doing. He can push the ball downfield. He's electric when he has to use his legs. And then we recently saw him when he came to the All-American Bowl Combine, and I'm not sure if he misplaced a pass on the day. His accuracy at the second and third levels of the defense has gone way up, and you can kind of see it just in that setting.
Pretty wild thinking back to the commitment to Tennessee. He nearly committed to Alabama. There was a little bit of a sudden change over a 24-hour span. Ended up sticking with his leader, Tennessee, and committed to them. At this point, you got LSU trying. North Carolina's making a run at him, which makes complete sense. He's a special talent. But I have just not heard a single thing from sources connected to Tennessee, from Faizon Brandon himself. I do not think he's even wavering in the slightest. He's a super active recruiter. We already talked about one of his top targets in Tristen Keys. I like Tennessee to keep him in the class, and I expect some big-time talent to join him in Knoxville.
Not just teams who have top targets, players also have targets to add to their 2026 class. There you have it, the top players in 2026 as of today. It is March. We still have senior seasons left to be played, plenty of camps, showcases, all that is ahead, but there is no change at the top. I said it, Faizon Brandon, still the number one player. Hudson, why is he still the best player in 2026?
I think it's just our comfort level with him, honestly, Emily. This is somebody who debuted in the initial top 100 before he'd even started a varsity game. And from there, he's just taken step after positive step. We've had recent live exposure to him that's been positive. In the junior season, while the volume of passes weren't as high as some of the other QBs in the class, he's just an elite decision maker at this stage. I think he's wired the right way between the ears. And you know, with Faizon Brandon, sometimes you just don't want to overthink it. Sometimes you got to ride with your guy.
Yeah, I think when we placed him number one, when we made that move, whenever it was, sometime in the last year, I gave Andrew a lot of credit, but we wanted to put a player there. Obviously, the positional value made a lot of sense, but it was also a guy that we could grow with. And I mean that from a development standpoint. I also mean that physically as well. When you look at Faizon Brandon, this is another one of those guys who will probably be in the DMV in a couple months trying to get his permit as well, right? Over the last 2 years, 29-1, and this is a guy that's still putting it together on the football field. Hudson mentioned the fact that he is an elite game-level manager, and that's what we like about him, but there is a part of his progression where he can continue to get better and better and better. So with a guy over 6'3", 190 pounds, it's going to be a guy that's going to play 210 pounds at the next level once he's in his second year of an SEC strength and conditioning program. I think his best football is ahead. You could go down the list. You can make an argument for Keisean Henderson, Ryder Lyons, Jared Curtis. There are a lot of good quarterbacks in this conversation that might be further ahead of a guy like Faizon Brandon today, but this is about tomorrow and Sundays as well, and we know he's going to be an elite playmaker and a guy that fits beautifully into that Josh Heupel offense.
I like that you guys keep reminding us just how young these players are. It's not just early in their development, it's early in our rankings process as well. Once again, those were just the 12 five-stars we have named